All right, peace and power elevation be to all you beautiful people out there. This your girl Tiffany coming through here live in effect. And I'm back with the topic about triangular trade. So the triangular trade was basically the transatlantic slave trade, right? Was which in case was dealing with the trades of goods for slaves, but between Africa and the Americas and Europe. All right. So again, between Africa, the Americas, and Europe. So it was trading of goods, you know what I'm saying, like materials, products, and trading of slaves. All right, peace, brother Chauncey. It's been a while. Yep. So I just want to go ahead and get into some information. I tried to come across read materials that pretty much pertain to the subject. I dug up as much as I possibly could, and I'm going to share with what I have. All right. Peace to you, brother or sister. Peace to you. All right. So I see some folks in the chat. Shout out to the chat. Y'all being supported. Shout out to y'all. Thank y'all so much. So let me go ahead and get started. So I always want to make sure that I go to the WikiWine source or the wiki source because that's a lot of people's favorite go-to website. And I want to present this information to you guys. Okay. So here's my screen. And it goes into triangular trade. So the triangular trade or triangle trade is trade between three ports or regions. Triangular trade usually involves when a region has exported commodities that are not required in the region from which its major imports come. It thus provides a method for rectifying trade imbalance between the above regions. So as you can see, right, you get the slaves to the Americas, okay? And then once they go to the Americas, sugars to New England, all right? They come from each of the American colonies or the regions. And then you take the rum and send them back to Africa. Okay, so there was the trade. So the rum was going back to Africa. And then when they went to Africa, they got the slaves, right? Brought them back to the Americas. Okay. And the sugars was sent from the Americas to New England colony. Right? So that's how it was. Okay, so that's how the trade was. And the reason why this is so important, because again, it shows the connection that we have as especially those in the diaspora. It shows our connection as far as our ancestry is concerned. Right in the Latin Americas and the Caribbeans and what we know today as United States. It shows that tie, the lineage. So this here tells a story of our ancestry. Okay. So you can't have history without science, and you cannot have science without history. And that's a fact. But let me go ahead and continue. So it says the three-way transatlantic trade known as the triangular trade was Atlantic slave trade. For example, the trade during the 17th and 18th centuries of slaves, sugar, often in its liquid form, molasses, and rum between West Africa, the West Indies, and northern colonies of the British North America. The slaves grew the sugar from which was brewed rum, in which in turn was traded for more slaves. In this circuit, the sea lane west from Africa to the West Indies and later also to the Brazil was known as the Middle Passage. Its cargo was abducted or recently purchased African slaves. All right, so let's look at the Middle Passage for a moment. So what was the Middle Passage? The Middle Passage was the stage of the Atlantic slave trade in which millions of enslaved Africans were forcibly transported to the Americas as part of the triangular slave trade. Ships departed Europe for African markets with manufactured goods first side of the triangle, which were traded for slaves, as rulers of African states were willing to capture and sell members of other regiments or tribes, right? Slave ships transported the human cargo in wretched conditions, males and females separated across the Atlantic's second side of the triangle. Morality was high. Those with strong bodies survived. Young females were raped by the crew. The proceeds from sales of the enslaved Africans were then used to buy hides, tobacco, sugar, rum, and raw materials, which would be transported back to northern Europe, third side of the triangle, to complete the triangle. Okay. All right. So, right here it goes into the first passage was the forced march of African slaves from their inland homes to African ports such as Elimina, where they were imprisoned until they could be loaded onto a buying ship. The final passage was the journey from the port of embarkation, such as Charleston, South Carolina, to the plantation or other destination where they would be put to work. The middle passage across the Atlantic joined these two. Voyages on the middle passage were large financial undertaking, generally organized by companies or groups of investors rather than individuals, right? The Middle Passage was considered a time in betweenness for those being traded from Africa to America. The close quarters and intentional division of pre-established African communities selling the cargo of the enslaved Africans by the ship crew motivated captive Africans to forge bonds of kinship, which then created forced transatlantic communities. The Middle Passage referred to the journeys from Africa to America and the condition under which these Africans lived. All right. So as you can see, the first passage was the forced march of African slaves from their in-home lands to African ports, such as Elimia, right? Then, of course, you got the middle passage. The voyage on the middle passage was large financial undertaking, generally organized by companies or groups of investors rather than individuals. Okay, and then you got the final passage. Was the journey from the port of disembarkation, such as Charleston, South Carolina, to the plantation or other destination where they would be put to work. All right. Now let's go back. Anyway, and this is historically, the particular routes were also shaped by the powerful influence of winds and currents during the age of sail. For example, from the main trading nation of Western Europe, it was much easier to sail westwards after going south of 30 degree in latitude, north latitude, and reaching the so-called trade winds, thus arriving in the Caribbean rather than going straight to the North American mainland. Returning from North America, it is easiest to follow the Gulf Stream in a northeasterly direction using the westerlies, a triangle similar to this called the Volta do Mar was already being used by the Portuguese before Christopher Columbus' voyage to sail to the Canary Islands and the Azores. Columbus expanded this triangle outwards, and his route became the main way for Europeans to travel to and from the Americas. So, I'm trying to figure out, speaking of Columbus, right? Why are we really celebrating Columbus Day here in America? I mean, why are people celebrating Columbus Day? What was so significant about him? Because what I see based on this information is the voyage. But what was really significant about Columbus that people got to celebrate Columbus Day in America? I never understood that. And I want to get some answers out there. What is so significant about Columbus Day? What's so significant? So it's funny that they celebrate Columbus Day here, but they don't celebrate the other European guy whose name America come from. So let me see, what's his name? What was his name? His name is Amerigo Vespucci. So it's funny, they don't celebrate Amerigo Vespucci, right? But they celebrate Christopher Columbus. I just never understood that dynamic. It never made sense. You celebrate Christopher Columbus, but you don't celebrate Amerigo Van. How you say that man's name again? Yeah, Vespucci. You don't celebrate Amerigo Vespucci. Oops. Damn. Hold on. Oh, give me 1 second. Dang. Yeah, getting back to the source, my bad. I deleted everything out. But have anybody asked that question? Have anybody wondered what's so significant about Christopher Columbus and why they don't celebrate Amerigo, which the country America is named after? I mean, it's just a thought. It's just a thought. I just always wonder. But anyways, let's go ahead and continue. Somebody put the Gulf Stream is what the African people of Mansa Musa Empire utilized to put them and their huge riverboats across the Atlantic to the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. I would have to look into that, so I can't. I would have to find some material on that to Okay, well, I have to find more material about that as far as like the African people of Mansa Musa Empire and how they utilize uh the riverboats across the Atlantic to the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. Well, that's something I gotta look into. Yeah, I'll have to look into that. All right. So the Atlantic Triangular Slave Trade. It says the most historically significant triangular trade was the transatlantic slave trade, right, which operated between Europe, Africa, and the Americas from the 16th to 19th century. Slave ships would leave European ports such as Bristol and Nantes, right, and sell to African ports loaded with goods manufactured in Europe. There, the slave trades would purchase enslaved Africans by exchanging the goods, then sell to the Americas via the Middle Passage to sell their enslaved cargo in European colonies. Afterwards, the slave ship would sail back to Europe to begin the cycle again. The enslaved Africans were primarily purchased for the purpose of working on plantation to work producing valuable cash crops, such as sugar, cotton, and tobacco, which were in high demand in Europe. Slave traders from European colonies would occasionally travel to Africa themselves, eliminate the European portion of the voyage. It says a classic example is the Colonial Molasses trade. The merchants purchased raw sugar from plantation in the Caribbean and shipped it to the New England and Europe, where it was sold to distillery companies that produce rum. Merchant capitalists used cash from the sale of sugar Two, purchased rum, furs, and lumber in New England, which their crews shipped to Europe. With the profits from the European sales, merchants purchased Europe's manufactured goods, including tools, weapons, and on the next leg, shipped those manufactured goods along with the American sugar and rum to West Africa, where they bartered the good for slaves seized by local potentates. The crews then transport the slaves to the Caribbean and sold them to sugar plantation owners. The cash from the sale of slaves in Brazil, the Caribbean islands, and the American South used to buy more raw materials, restarting the cycle. The full triangle trip took a calendar year on average, according to the historian Clifford Shipton. Then what else it says? The first leg of the triangle was from a European port to Africa, in which ships carried supplies for sale and trade, such as copper, cloth, trinkets, slave beads, guns, and ammunition. When the ships arrived, its cargo would be sold and bartered for slaves. On the second leg, ships made the journey of the Middle Passage from Africa to the New World. Many slaves died of disease in the crowded holds of the slave ship. Once the ship reached the New World, enslaved survivors were sold in the Caribbean or the American colonies. The ships were then prepared to get them thoroughly cleaned, drained, and loaded with exported goods for a return voyage. The third leg to their home port from the West Indies. The main export cargoes were sugar, rum, and molasses from Virginia, tobacco, and hemp. The ship then returned to Europe to complete the triangle. All right. So as you can see, they was going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It was a back and forth. It was a constant thing. And it says the triangle route was not generally followed by individual ships. Slave ships were built to carry large numbers of people rather than cargo, and variation in duration of the Atlantic crossing meant that they often arrived in the Americas out of season. Slave ships thus often returned to their home port carrying whatever goods were readily available in the Americas, but with a large part of all of their capacity with ballast. Cash crops were transported mainly by a separate fleet, which only sailed from Europe to the Americas and back. In his books, Herbert S. Klein has argued that in many fields, cost of trade, ways of transporting, morality levels, earnings, and benefits of trade for Europeans in the so-called triangular trade. The non-scientific literature portrays a situation which the contemporary historiography reviewed a long time ago. A 2017 provides evidence for the hypothesis that the export of gunpowder to Africa increased the transatlantic slave trade. A 1% increase in gunpowder set in motion a 5-year gun slave cycle that increased slave exported by an average of 50%, and the impact continued to grow over time. All right. So before I continue, I want to show you guys the map here. So, okay, here's the map. And this is the loss of the slave ship. Okay, as you can see, that slave ship was caught on fire. So at the end of the day, right, according to the source, what we know that slavery was about building economics. Let's say again, slavery was about building economics. As you can see, slavery was not a United States business. It was a North America. It was the South America. It was Latin America, Caribbean, European business. Okay, these are the. This was the whole thing. Okay, the whole Americas, right, was occupied by the Europeans, right? It was their port, and pretty much that means that it was their land. It was the region that they ran control, because the more land you have, right, the more that you accumulate profit. In order for them to accumulate profit, they would have to get slaves to do the work on those land or the regions. So with those slaves coming from Africa, right, being placed in the Caribbean, being placed in the United States, or what today is known as the United States, and sent to other places, but in this case, the Caribbean, Latin America, and United States, and going back and forth. It was to build their economy. It was because most of these European countries did not have natural resources. They don't have the natural resources like the continent of Africa does. Okay? They don't have the resources like these Caribbean do. Okay? And various parts of America. So they went to those lands because they knew that it can make them profit. So they illegally took over these lands. When I say illegally, it was already native staying there, but pretty much they ran the natives out and they brought their own people and they brought the slaves over to occupy those lands, to grow the resources, right? To pick up the crops and to trade it off to the continents to get more slaves and to trade off to their homeland to bring more economics. Now, when I hear folks talking about, oh, these Caribbean people, they coming to America, they reaping the benefits off of us, this, that, and the other. No, they're not. They're not reaping that benefit. If they are, they're not reaping as much benefit as you think. The main people that's reaping the benefit off of us, and I just gave you the answers, are those who have oppressed us. They reaping most of the benefits. They reaping the benefits. Those are the main people that you should go after, not your Caribbean brothers, not your African brothers and sisters, okay? Not the people from the Latin country, but the people that have been oppressing you for the past 500 or 400 years. Those are the people that's making lucrative income, okay? Those are the people that has the generational wealth. Those are the people that have the top that are very rich, okay? So don't be in competition with those who are Caribbean. Don't be in competition with those who are West African, okay? Don't be in competition with those who are from the Latin country. You know what I'm saying? Those are not your competition. Those are not your oppressors. Now, can we make an argument that there are Africans that played a part? Of course, it's called a trade, slave trade. So yeah, there was Africans that did trade off slaves to these European because they wanted resources, material. But there's a little bit more behind it than what we know. Now, there was some who did it because they made the choice. They did it voluntarily. Then there were those who could have done it involuntarily. What I say by involuntary, that means that it could have been a form of extortion taking place, right? They could have been threatened that, hey, if you don't give us these people or give us what we want, then we just gonna come in and take over. Because the European wanted to be the most dominated group. They wanted to have world power. All right, let's just keep it real. They want world power. They wanted to go where they know they can make money. And they went to a place like Africa. But here's the trick behind that. After the slave trade was over with, then they went to colonize the continent. They went to colonize most of the West African countries. They went to colonize it. So you know, did the slave trade with these people, but you want more. So now you going over there and you taking over the resources. You profiting off of them over there. And not only in the continent of Africa, but parts of Asia, especially in India. They profit off the Indian people with the whole tea. So what I'm saying is, these people, the European descended folks, they are making a lucrative income off of you. Both you Africans, you Caribbeans, you African Americans, you Afro Latinos, these motherfucking Europeans are making a profit off of you, and they ain't giving you a damn dime. They're not giving you a damn dime for it. They want you to sit here and go back and forth with each other about who belongs to what group, who is the FBA, who is the ADOS, or who the ADOC, or whatever they call themselves. They want you to sit back and go back and forth, creating this false dichotomy amongst you, right? They don't want you to see who the real enemy is. They don't want you to see who's the real people that's making money off of you. They want you to sit back and go back and forth and bicker with each other, right? So you have this perception about one another. African Americans done talk down on African people. African people done talk down African Americans. The Caribbeans, Latinos talk down black folks. Black folks don't talk down the Caribbean Latinos, okay? They have created the narrative, and they have done a good job by bringing the false dichotomy, and we fell into that trap. We fell into that trap. Not all of us, but a vast majority of us done fell into that trap. While we sit here arguing back and forth, these motherfuckers gonna continue to make their money off your ass. They continue to suck you dry. They gonna continue to suck you dry. They laughing their asses to the bank. I'm gonna say it again. They laughing their asses to the bank. They making sure they passing down generational wealth. They make up the majority. They got access to capital. Your ass don't. Your asses ain't got access to no damn capital. And it will take a long time for black people on a collective scale to catch up with the revenue of their white counterparts. And have you noticed anything that's majority African descent, right? Any place that's majority African descent, there's majority black folks, right? Do you know that there is a lot more poverty taking place? Even if it's ran by those who are black in power, do you know that majority of the black folks are pretty much in poverty? Have you noticed that? They don't make up those who are very wealthy compared to their European counterpart. I mean, that's just something to think about. That's just something to think about. Something to think about. So what I'm saying is white supremacy is global. It's not just an American thing. It's a global thing. Because these people want imperialism. They want to control the economic resources. They want to be the most dominant group, the most wealthiest group. They're going to look out for their generation, for their people, before they even look out for the rest. Okay. Yes, slavery was about capitalism. Slavery was about capitalism. That's what it was all about. It was about capitalism. Slavery is what built capitalism. Slavery is what built this economic system that we currently live in today, which we know as capitalism. That's what it is. Slavery is what built capitalism. So we sit here and argue about, is capitalism good for us? There is pros and cons to that. On the individual level, yes, it's good for the individuals, but on a collective level, it's not. Capitalism is not good for the collective. But for those selective individuals, it is good. For the collective, it's not. All right. All right, then. Oh, I'm going in. All right, so let's see what else. Okay, so this is the chart right here. And it says number of slaves imported from Africa per 25-year period, right? All right, so right here in 1776, 1800, you had more slaves that was imported from Africa than any other time period. So you had up to like 2 million slaves, right? That was imported between 1776 and 1800. Okay. And then the numbers started to get smaller in 1851 and 1866. But the number was much smaller in 1501 to 1525. Why is that number so small? Because the first people that went to Africa to start getting slaves were the Portuguese, and they didn't get that many a number of slaves during that time. Okay, it was the Portuguese and Spanish people. They went over there to the Congo, Angola area, right? Up in Gambia, grabbed some slaves and brought them to the brought them to their colonies, their regions. Right. So that's why the numbers is very small, because it wasn't that many slaves that was imported. The numbers didn't start growing until about 1576 to 1600. And again, the largest increase was 1776 and 1800. That was the largest increase of the slaves. Okay. Then the second largest increase was 1751 to 1775. Right. Then, of course, the number declines in 1801 to 1825. Then declines in 1826 to 1850. Then goes back low to 1851 to 1866. Now, during this time period, slavery was no longer it was abolished. It was outlawed. But because it was outlawed, they were still importing slaves into this country illegally. Okay? Illegally. All right. Now it says New England also made rum from Caribbean sugar and molasses, which it shipped to Africa as well as within the New World. Yet the triangle trade, as considered in relation to New England, was a piecemeal operation. No New England traders are known to have complete a sequential circuit of the full triangle, which took a calendar year on average, according to historian Clifford Shipton. The concept of New England triangular trade was first suggested inconclusively in an 1866 book by George H. Moore, and was picked up in 1872 by George C. Mason, and reached full consideration from a lecture in 1887 by American businessman and historian William B. Whitton. Newport and Bristol, Rhode Island, were major ports involved in the colonial triangular slave trade. Many significant Newport merchants and traders participated in the trade, worked closely with merchants and traders in the Caribbean and Charleston, South Carolina. All right. Now, slavery was more of a northern business than it was a southern business. Okay. So the slaves, although they was sent to Virginia, but a lot of them went to the northern states. Then they went to the southern states. All right. But the northern states was the first to abolish slavery. The southern states kept slavery going because they need the money to build their economics. Remember, it was two different Americas. All right. Before there was the United States of America, you had the northern part of the states that was United States, and the southern part of the state was called the Confederate States of America. So the Confederate state was trying to build up their economy, right? While the United States, which was the north, they was like, look, we don't want slavery. We don't need slavery anymore because we got a whole new thing now. We got the Industrial Revolution. So we don't need to use slavery. And the South said, well, we're going to continue to have slavery because it's building up that agricultural business, right? Agriculture, dealing with farming and pastoralism and all of that, okay? Whereas in the North, it was more so about textiles, okay? That's what it was more about. But the South is where They was making big money. They was like, shoot, we don't want to stop this. But they eventually had to put a stop to it because there was a civil war going on. So the Civil War brought about the Reconstruction era and brought about the United States. Capitalism is not even good for the insurance of a strong family. A family itself becomes dependent and at the will of capitalist force. Very true. I agree. I agree that from a collective point of view, capitalism is not good because we already see what it does to the racial wealth gap. If we lived in another economic system, I don't think that we would have to worry about racial wealth gap. But again, for an individual, if they want to capitalize, then yeah, capitalism gonna be good for the individual because it's an individual. But for a collective community, no. What capitalism gonna do collectively? And there's an article that's out that stated that it would take 227 years for a black family to catch up with the white family. 227 years. 227 years. All right, so I want to show you guys this chart real fast. All right, so destination Portuguese Brazil, right? And this is how many vessel was it carrying the slaves. This is how many slaves they have transported. Okay, each of these people from each Europeans from different colonies, right, from different countries, and how many slaves they transported over into the region. Okay, you got Portuguese Brazil, British Caribbean, French Caribbean, right? Spanish Americas, Dutch Americas, United States, Danish West Indies, and Europe, and Africa, and how many of those that did not arrive. All right, so that's the little chart right there. I'm not going to go into all of that. Okay, so you can also see at the bottom of the page, you got the notes at the bottom, you got the reference at the bottom, you got the external links, right? Okay. See what else I want to pull up. All right, as you can see right here, pbs.org. It goes into more about the triangular slave trade. So you can check it out on pbs.org, the website. And I also strongly recommend you guys to check out Dr. Henry Louis Gates, Many Rivers to Cross. So let me put that up. Okay, so Dr. Henry Louis Gates had a show called Finding Your Roots. All right, so he had documentary films called Wonders of the African World, African American Lives, Faces of America, Black in Latin America, Black America since MLK, and Still I Rise, and Africa's Great Civilization. So if you guys haven't got a chance to, you guys need to check his show. Then he got the 6-part PBS documentary called The African American Many Rivers to Cross. Okay. Then he got the one called The Reconstruction, America After the Civil War. Then he just came out with one back in 2020, I believe. It was called Black Churches. All right, so I would recommend you guys to look him up, Dr. Henry Louis Gates, and then what you mean his teaching is biased? How is it biased? What do you mean that his teaching is biased? How is it very biased? Now, do he have his own? Now, there has been some controversy. Okay. So there's been controversy about Henry Louis Gates said something about Dr. John Henry Clark and his teaching or whatever. Okay. So of course, he had his opinion about Dr. John and others, but nonetheless, there is a lot of great information that he has put out in his documentary regarding to African Americans and African history in general, and it's very reliable sources, reliable information, very reliable information. All right, so it's very accurate for the most part. Okay, now does he have his own opinion about certain things? Yes, he has his own opinions. Okay, but when it comes to historical context, right, and historical facts, it's very well depicted. It's very well depicted. So many people may feel some kind of way about him, and you're entitled to that. But I recommend those documentaries as a beginning start. So if you guys want to look further on into research, then that's on you. You guys can, look further on or whatever. But I recommend that because he has pretty accurate sources. So his information is pretty accurate. Especially when it talks about the many rivers to cross. So yeah, there's a lot of accurate things in that documentary. I say it's better than watching Tariq Nasheed. It's better than watching Tariq Nasheed in Hidden Colors. Because if you want to get some accurate stuff, you better off watching Henry Louis Gates than you is watching Tariq Nasheed. That's my honest opinion. Scholars do have opinions about things. They do. Scholars have opinions. That's not true. For you to say a scholar has no opinion, that is not true. Some scholars does have opinions about certain things, especially when they don't have the exact answers about certain stuff. You must not been watching how scholars have debated each other. Because scholars have sat down, they have debated each other because each of them had their own point of view about certain stuff. Now, you can't use your whole entire confirmation bias to everything. You have to deal with history from what it is. But at the end of the day, you're going to have your opinion about certain things. You can't stop people from having opinions. All right? You can't stop people from having opinions about certain things. Or you can't stop people from debating about certain issues. You know what I'm saying? Having their point of views. Hell, scientists have their own opinions about certain stuff. All right. They have opinions. They're going to have that, and you're entitled to that. But when it comes down to deal with historical facts, you have to deal with the historical facts. And that's what Henry Louis Gates deals with, the historical facts. I mean, regardless how you may feel. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I've been studying this man for a while too. So I've been studying this man for a while too. I've been looking at his stuff, and a lot of his stuff is very accurate. So if I was to say between Tariq Nasheed and Henry Louis Gates, I would say it'd be best to watch Henry Louis Gates than listen to Tariq Nasheed and his documentary, because there's a lot of inaccuracy in Tariq documentary. You would better off learn from Dr. Henry Louis Gates. And that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying to you. Okay, so now let's see what else I'm going to go to. All right, so I'm just going to show you guys some books that you guys should look into and, read about. This one is called The Atlantis of Slavery. The Atlantis of Slavery by James Walvin. All right. So if you guys want to check this book out, you can. If you're on my social media, I'll make sure I post these information for you. Then the rise of the transatlantic slave trade in Western Africa, 1300 to 1589. All right. So you guys can look at that book as well. All right. So if you are interested. This one is called The Atlantic Slave Trade from West Central Africa, 1780 to 1867, which is by Daniel D. Dominic de Silvia. Okay, there you go. And then this other one I have is Senegambia and the Atlantic Slave Trade. Senegambia and the Atlantic Slave Trade by Boubacar Berry. Boubacar Berry. Okay. So, and what's so significant about Senegambia is a lot of the ancestors came up out of Senegambia and they were brought here to the Americas. That's the interesting part. But then what's so funny is a lot of us got Nigerian descent in us. And why do we have Nigerian descent in us? Because of the fact that the Nigerians were breeding. When they was brought here to America, the Igbo people in particularly, they were sent over to the Virginia region, right? And they were breeding amongst themselves. And they was pretty much forced to breed and to continue to have more slaves. So that's why a lot of us got Nigerian in us. But you will see that we also got a lot of Senegambia in us too, because it was a lot of Senegambian people that was brought here to America. And Ghanaian and people from the Ivory Coast, Congo, Angola. Yeah. Oh yeah. So we are a mixture. We are what you call the Creole Africans. So the Creole Africans, yes, we are what Brother Geechee said. He said what Sudanic Creoles. That's what he calls the Sudanic Creole, West Sudanic Creoles. That's what Brother Geechee calls Western Sudanic Creoles. Western Sudanic Creoles. That means that we are a mixture of multiple African descent. You know what I'm saying? We not just, our ancestors did not just come from one area, right? But although the Senegambia people made up a large proportion of those people, right? We just have multiple African tribes, multiple African, West African, Central African in us. People come from the Ivory Coast, Ghana, Senegambia, Nigeria, the Congo, Angola area. We are a mixture. We are a mixed people, you know what I'm saying? We mix with multiple tribes. So when people ask, well, what tribe do you come from? Well, you can't pinpoint exactly what tribe you come from, you know what I'm saying? You can't say, oh, I come from these Yoruba, the Fonte people, the Igbo, the Fon, or all of that. You can't really say that. It's like you come from multiple tribes. What the hell? We were related in Africa under Empire Goddess has nothing to do with being brought here together. I don't understand what you mean by that. We were related in Africa under Empire Goddess. Okay. Well, at the time, there was no concept of what we know today as race. And a lot of Africans did not see each other as one. They were like multiple tribes, okay, different tribes. So they weren't like one significant tribe. You know what I'm saying? It was different tribes, so they went by tribal groups. So what that means is that we are the tribes are considered basically ethnic groups of Africa. So we are of multiple tribes. You know what I'm saying? We're not just one specific tribe. We just can't claim one tribe. You know what I'm saying? It's like multiple tribes is mixed in us. Okay, I understand you better. Yes. Okay, now I get what you're saying. All right. Now there were African tribes that did intermarried with other tribes. Okay, like the Hausa tribe married within the Fulani tribe. So the Fulani and the Hausa people was at odds with each other at one point. Then they intermarried with each other. So yes, you did have African tribes that married amongst other tribes. That is true. Okay, they did. There were those who did that. So yes, yes, you're right. There are those who did. Well, some of them didn't do that. Some of them didn't. Some of them kept tribalism. There was those who kept tribalism. Now, there were those who abandoned it, but there was those who wanted to keep it going. Okay, well, I don't know anything about him being proud of the Irish blood or whatever, but he is telling the truth that most majority of black folks do not have Native American blood in them. Majority of black folks don't. That is true. That is true. Most black people do not have Native American blood in them. And if they do, they have a very small percentage. What Dr. Henry Louis Gates was getting at is that most black people that claim to have Native American blood in them, they actually have more European in them than they have Native in them. Now, there are those blacks who do have Native in their family, okay? Because of the regions that their ancestor came from, and in those regions those African descended people had relation with Native Americans. Yes, so there are those that do, but a vast majority of black folks do not have Native American like they do. And if they do, they only have a small percentage of Native American in them. They have more European blood in them than they do with Native American. So that's what he was trying to get at. Now, I don't know about him being proud of his Irish blood and all of that, but I do remember him explaining that. I do remember him explaining that though. But all right then. Damn. Ooh, my legs. My legs killing me. All right then. Well, that's all I have for tonight. And I'm gonna go ahead and get off of here. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Again, thank you all for supporting the channel. Thank you all for watching the channel, sharing my videos, and subscribing, etc. So I'll make sure that I keep you guys posted on what's going on. With that being said, this is your girl Tiffany, and I'm logging off. And I'm going to say this: peace and power and elevation be to all of you. And until next time, be safe, take it easy on yourself, and deuces. All right. All right, then. Y'all take it easy. Thank you very much.